По нам пиздуют, сука!
Я викупаюся в окопі орки, а я один. Дуже було проблематично. І що я зробив? Я вибіжав з окопа, позвав своїх двох товаришів, і ми вдвоєм туди вривали, троєм туди вривались.
This soldier belongs to Ukraine's K2 battalion, an elite military unit that has gained notoriety in the bloody war against the powerful Russian nation. And he's not talking about a dream in which he was fighting with creepy fantasy beings. This is something much more real, brutal, and terrifying. The Orcs are Moscow's soldiers, those who have killed many of their comrades and lurk in every trench waiting for the opportunity to attack. The conflict continues to spread, but the violence does not end. The number of victims is increasing, and as long as neither army is willing to take a step back, the corpses will continue to pile up on the battlefield. In this new video from Military Force, we will once again delve into the war between Russians and Ukrainians to discover new secrets through the testimonies of its own protagonists. We will learn where the most offensive nicknames of the conflict come from and some of the most action-packed moments experienced by the combatants.
Ти заді мене, я йду. Сука!
Since the beginning of the Russian invasion on February 24, 2022, there have been reports of human rights abuses, massive destruction of civilian infrastructure, looting, and behavior that the international community considers barbaric. This brutality has led Ukrainian soldiers and citizens to dehumanize Kremlin fighters, using the term orcs to refer to them. In this way, the image of them as a destructive and ruthless force, devoid of morals, is reinforced. Now, to understand the origin of the word, we must understand the relationship with the literary works of J.R.R. Tolkien, who created a fantasy world with evil and cruel creatures at the service of a dark power. In The Lord of the Rings, his most recognized work, orcs are that character without ethics or humanity, who are only used as a tool of conquest and devastation. In many conflicts, it is common for derogatory terms to be used to talk about the enemy. In this case, many Ukrainians have compared Russia to Mordor, the land of evil in Tolkien's works. This fictional place is seen as a center of oppressive power from which armies of destruction are sent, something that in Kyiv they see reflected in the imperialist policies of the Kremlin and the authoritarian nature of Putin's government. In this analogy, Russian soldiers become the orcs who blindly obey their dark master. Furthermore, this nickname helps to complete a narrative in which a struggle between good and evil is posed. The use of the word strengthens the collective identity in times of war, where Ukrainians see themselves as heroes defending their home, freedom and democracy against a ruthless invader who wants to impose his dominance.
Братан, падай, падай, падай!
However, this kind of dehumanization of the enemy achieved through the term orc can also have negative effects. The nickname is used not only by Ukrainian soldiers in the field, but also by the entire society, including politicians, officials, and even President Volodymyr Zelensky himself. In this way, it reinforces a level of hatred that may hinder the possibility of reconciliation in the future. By reducing Russian troops to creatures devoid of humanity, the ability to recognize the complexity of the conflict and the individual tragedies experienced by those involved, whether on one side or the other, is eliminated.
Ну вон трупов куча. Пиздец.
The war is just as cruel for both Ukrainian and Russian soldiers, but that won't stop hatred from continuing to be generated behind the idea that one side is good and the other bad. For that reason, the conflict will continue with the same brutality that has been shown so far. This invites us to bring new, terrifying situations that the protagonists of the battle experience day by day. On this occasion, we will be able to learn about some of the most shocking moments of the war from the point of view of the members of the Ukrainian K2 battalion. This outstanding unit is part of the country's armed forces, specifically within the 54th Mechanized Brigade, one of the most active in the conflict. Because of that, the battalion has been involved in several of the main defensive and offensive operations by the Kyiv Army, especially in the Donbass region, which includes highly disputed areas such as Bakhmut and other towns near the front lines. The K2 is known for its use of armored vehicles and modern warfare tactics. Its operations are often coordinated with artillery units and missile systems, allowing it to carry out precise strikes against Russian forces. It has also shown great skill in using drones for reconnaissance and targeted attacks. But in such a violent and savage war, every strategy always has its pros and cons, as one of these soldiers explains.
Є плюс в піхоті, що чому проще бути піхотинцем, ти стоїш якби в обороні, в окопі. А штурмувати чому мінус? Ти в повний рост ідеш і по тобі все працює. Артилерія, тобто, і вже, виходить, руські сидять в окопах. Наша, коли ситуація ми вибиваємо так, з окопів руських. Це тяжко, бо вони вже сидять в окопах і по тобі стріляють. І ще їхні дрони, і артилерія працює.
Throughout the conflict, K2 battalion fighters have shared videos and testimonies of their operations on social media, which has helped increase their visibility and image as a highly effective unit on the battlefield. These posts have also served to inspire morale among Ukrainian citizens. One of the examples to demonstrate this is an operation in which they managed to repel an assault by Russian forces in the Donetsk region. The unit publicized the confrontation that began with the arrival of an enemy convoy that was advancing towards Ukrainian positions until it came across a minefield. The Kremlin's armored vehicles were surprised by the fierce detonations that forced them to stop after losing 2 of their vehicles. The K2 battalion had managed to prepare the ground with explosives the night before the offensive by means of drones, and now they had the adversary right where they wanted it. The artillery of the local defenses began to fire on the rivals' tanks and infantry fighting vehicles. As a result of the attack, the Russians lost another of their tanks. However, the Moscow infantrymen were not ready to give up and began to advance on the terrain under the cover of the tanks that were still standing.
Монтер, пардон, на прием. Тоже передай, что это пидоры, пусть они там в полном БГ, как принял прием.
The exchange of fire lasted for several minutes until the Russians realized that their assault had failed and decided to abandon the area. However, the tanks retreated so quickly that they left part of their infantry troops without support as they continued on the field heading towards the Ukrainian positions. Unprotected, the Kremlin soldiers were exposed to the drones of the K2 battalion, which patiently prepared well-targeted attacks against their enemies.
Їх двоє, два. Щас. Вичекай момент. Щас двох підійдуть і можете монстра побачити.
In total, during the failed offensive, Russian forces lost 5 units of military equipment, while 34 fighters were killed. This is one of many engagements in which the K2 battalion has participated. Although the unit is deeply remembered for its defense of Bakhmut during the intense fighting. Russian armed forces, supported by mercenaries from the Wagner Group and separatist militias from Donbass, tried to capture the town for months in the hope of breaking through Ukrainian lines and advancing west. The K2, along with other Russian units, dug in and endured a relentless siege. Day after day, under the constant roar of artillery, the soldiers repelled attacks, resisting with a ferocity that baffled their enemies. The battalion's armored vehicles, covered in dust and shrapnel, roamed the destroyed streets, providing crucial support to the infantry in urban fighting. These men were fighting not only for Bakhmut, but for every inch of Ukrainian soil. The town was the bloodiest scene of the war so far, due to the number of casualties suffered by both sides. However, thanks to the efforts of local troops, it became a symbol of resistance. Russian forces could not break the spirit of the K2 battalion, which, despite the extreme conditions and brutality of the siege, continued to fight with inexplicable tenacity. The courage and determination of this unit prevented Bakhmut from falling for months, giving other Ukrainian troops time to reorganize and launch counteroffensives in different areas of the front. However, to achieve this, it also had to face enormous challenges and face death on more than one occasion.
Осколок мне в щеку залетел. Это был третий штурм как раз на Тешке. Мы подлетели до Тешки, высадились, и по нам прилетело краснополе. Індивідуальний перев'язочний пакет. Він мені 2 рази життя спас. Точніше, 1 раз мені, а другий раз побратиму.
There is no doubt that the K2 battalion has demonstrated an unrivaled combination of courage and military discipline in taking on a much larger and well-equipped army. However, that ability to adapt in order to withstand a prolonged conflict against Russia also came at a high cost. Moscow's overwhelming numerical and technological superiority has had a strong impact throughout the invasion. Vladimir Putin's army may not have been able to subdue and conquer its neighbor in a matter of weeks or months as expected, but that does not mean it has not dealt hard blows. Ukrainian losses were also felt in the K2 battalion, so the members of this symbol of resistance have more than one reason to fight. This is how one of the unit's commanders explains what it feels like when a comrade dies in combat.
Це дуже важко. І якщо чесно, дуже багато командирів бояться саме цього. Відповідальності за своїх бійців. А те, як у нас колектив маленький, вони всі мені брати. І коли йдуть втрати, я дуже тяжко це переживаю.
As we can see, and like many other Ukrainian units, the K2 has suffered losses throughout the conflict. The brutal and merciless war has claimed the lives of many of its brave fighters. But what distinguishes these troops is not only their combat ability, but their unbreakable spirit. Despite the casualties and hardships, the battalion has maintained its cohesion and determination to defend Ukraine until the end. This attitude has been fueled both by the desire to protect their homeland and by a deep sense of camaraderie among its members. As this commander explained, his soldiers do not fight only for the flag of their country, but also for the comrades who are at their side, for the friends and family who await their return.
Братан, вони отам справа. Кричи по-русски, кричи по-русски. Свои!
Amidst the destruction, stories of heroism and sacrifice abound. Warriors who risked their lives to save their comrades, units that held out under constant bombardment, and leaders who inspired their men to keep fighting when all seemed lost. This is how the battalion continues to venture into every battle scenario, no matter how challenging. The fear exists, but the spirit to keep fighting is greater.
Приход рядом!
The conflict seems far from over, and the days continue to feel like hell for Ukraine's forces. Russian troops are determined to continue to launch constant artillery bombardments alongside fierce ground assault attempts. This is the challenge that once again finds the men of the K2 battalion at the center of the battle. Despite fatigue, cold, and a lack of supplies at times, the unit holds its own. Once again, mechanized tactics and the use of technology such as drones prove decisive. Kyiv's soldiers use their armored vehicles to launch lightning counterattacks, surprising Moscow's fighters at their weakest points. At night, the battalion's reconnaissance and saboteur units infiltrate enemy lines, demoralizing the invaders and collecting vital information that is then used to direct artillery strikes.
Ух ты, нихуя! Давай, давай! Давай, братан! Давай, давай, давай! Братан, по нас плотно 120! Сюда, сюда, сюда!
As we near the end, we can assure you that as long as this brutal conflict continues, the K2 battalion will continue to play a crucial role in military operations against the Russian Orcs. Its bravery, skill, and resilience have made it a symbol of Ukrainian resistance. Future generations will look back and remember the exploits of this unit as an integral part of the fight for freedom and independence of their country. The K2 has not only defended its territory, but has shown the world that the strength of an army does not always lie in its size or its equipment, but in the heart and determination of those who fight for what they feel is right. In this duel against a gigantic enemy, the battalion stands out as a steel shield and a beacon of hope. Now, after learning the story of this incredible unit, the time has come to say goodbye. Thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to meeting you again in our next military force video.